doing like these live reactions or anything like that. We're going to be going full in, the hard in depth about this ban list. So let's just jump right into it. I'm going to be discussing every single card that is on the ban list and justifying why they are hit or coming off the list in greater detail. And afterwards, I'm going to be discussing what I believe how the meta might actually shape up, because I do have quite a bit of an opinion on this. So let's just jump right into the overall deck lists here, or not the deck lists, the card hits here. So the first card that we have here is actually Guardragon Ogapane. And everyone and their mother was actually clamoring for this card to be put on the ban list, and for good reason. This card actually just sets up a negate from a monster that is harder, that is supposed to be harder to summon for a reason. It's not necessarily to kill any particular engine. I think the Guardragon engine is still fine without Ogapane. You can cycle out your red MDs or your dragons through LP and Pisty all you want, but I think Ogapane is definitely a natural case of just being way too overpowered and summoning monsters just for free from your extra deck that have no right to being summoned that way. It just breaks every limit that the game is certainly set up for itself. It's definitely one of those cards that definitely defies the logic of how the game is supposed to progress, much like in the same way, like, Painful Choice, it would not ever see the light of day. This card should not have actually been printed. So for the most part, I think this is a generally good hit for the to keep Guardragons in check. You can still do all your red MD shenanigans where you just flip flop that card out of your deck and graveyard and do all that sort of stuff. And maybe that's viable for you, but for the most part, this was just necessary evil. This is just necessary, just something to actually take care of the overarching problem, which was just summoning Hot Red Dragon, Archfiend Abyss, and Crystal Wing Sinker Dragon for literally free when they're not supposed to be summoned that way. So. Next card we also have here is Nightmare Mermaid. This is for the sole reason that Orcust was actually being splashed into virtually anything. Literally anything. You can find decks, you can find Orcust Salamangrates floating around on the internet. You can find Salamangrate Gravekeeper decks probably somewhere floating around on the internet. If you could find the combo in this deck, you would probably play the Orcust combo because it is so prevalent, it's so good, it's so painstakingly oppressive, believe it or not. Despite the fact that it doesn't even really set up anything inherently broken, it sets up like a counter trap and Dingirsu maybe, and a topological bomber dragon, which blows up the board if your opponent accidentally summons a monster into a zone that it points to, or you can summon it into a zone that they point to. The boards for the Orcust combo generally wasn't that oppressive, and that's why I think Pure Orcust is going to be it's going to be a fair deck, but it's definitely not going to be like in every single deck that you've seen up until for the past 6 or 7 months now. It's kind of crazy how this has all been playing out, and but the Orcust engine is definitely going to have to rely on some different tools. Maybe you play some different Foolish Burial counters. Maybe instead of just playing Nightmare Goblin to special summon your Orcust Nightmare from your deck, you now just Foolish Burial it. Just, you skip a step. Sure, you don't get to summon the monster, but you really just used it to make make Galatea, but now you can't really do that as easy. You have to find some way to do that. But for the most part, I think Lunalight Orcust probably might still be a deck. I think Dark Warrior, as we continue on, Dark Warrior Orcust might actually still be considered a viable deck. But Pure Orcust is also definitely a contender in the deck, so don't let this actually just deter you from playing Orcust in general, because I think that's a mistake if you are planning to play Orcust. So you'll just have to find some different tools to use other than Nightmare Mermaid. That's all I'm saying. And the next card that we're going to be talking about here is actually the only card that has ever actually been hit on the limited list, and that is Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor. So Sky Striker Meta Widow Anchor is actually kind of insane. The reason why it's insane is not because of the fact that it is searchable. That's actually the least of its problems. The fact that you can activate it on your opponent's turn, it's a snatch steal, and you can recur it pretty damn easily. It really just makes this card really inherently broken. I predicted this when we were first really getting our eyes on the Sky Striker cards. I said that this card could very well go to 1 or very well be ban worthy, because of the fact that it is not only is it a monster card, the card that negates a monster effect, but it steals the monster. That's incredibly unbalanced. So this is just going to limit the potential win conditions of Sky Strikers. They're still going to have it. They're still going to have this card on hand almost all the time, because they can still use multi-roll and set it on the field. But if your one multi-roll dies, then I guess you just only have to deal with one Widow Anchor, which is totally fine. But I guess for the most part, I guess we might see, if we're going to see Sky Strikers in the future, I think Mind Striker is going to be the more popular variant of Sky Strikers. If we even see Sky Strikers, I'm getting my tongue twisted. I'm not even sure if we're going to see this deck as much as we have been recently. But we will definitely have to wait and see. I will give you my opinions on it in a little bit as well. So the next card that we're going to talk about here is Dark Arm Dragon. The Dark Arm Dragon is at 3 in the OCG and is currently not doing anything. However, I think this card has room for some experimentation in the TCG. I think people will attempt to play in their Burning Abyss decks. I think people will attempt to play this in their Orcus decks, and when they realize that it doesn't actually really work all that well, they'll cut it. Or if they do end up not cutting it, and it actually ends up being pretty decent, then cool. I actually don't mind. I think this card actually has a little bit of room to kind of be okay. I'm not sure if it's going to be meta defining or if it's going to be necessary even, but you can definitely look and see how this will shape the metagame in the future. So I definitely think this card is going to be experimented with, but ultimately cut in the very end. So let's just go on with the Unlimiteds, because there's actually some things to talk about here. Some things that are quite interesting. So the first card that we're going to be talking about here is Chaos Emperor Dragon Envoy the End. We're not going to really say too much about this card. It's not particularly great. The errata on this card actually makes it not that viable at all. So we can see this card go to 3. We can even see this card go to 5, and it wouldn't really make that much of a difference. So we're just not really going to talk about that. Maybe it'll see some experimentation in somewhere, but I'm not really going to hold my breath on that fact. So the next card here is actually quite a doozy. We're actually putting Destiny Hero Malicious back to 3. Now, this is why I think that the Dark Heroes Orcus deck might have, or Dark Warrior Orcus deck might have some potential viability. It's unclear, though, how they're going to continuously abuse Destiny Hero Malicious, but generally speaking, when this card has always been at 3, there has always been a way to abuse this card for a while. We saw it up until it got semi-limited last year in the Dark Warrior deck. We also saw it in Dark Synchro. We see it occasionally being splashed in zombie decks as well. So I wouldn't be terribly surprised if this card ended up back semi-limited in the future. But I think it does push Dark Warrior Orcus to be kind of a contender a little bit, even if they don't have Nightmare Mermaid. But we'll have to wait and see how that works. So, but, you know. Next on, we're going to move on to Ether, the Heavenly Monarchs. This largely does not matter that much, mostly because that we don't have Pantheism at 3. I think if Pantheism was at 3, we might have a little bit of something to talk about here. I think Pantheism is just such a good card that you might as well just put it back at 3 just to give that deck some tier 2 competitive success. It will see some play. It will definitely be played against some of the favorites, like Necros and Inzectors we're going to be seeing here, but next Inzectors is not going to be tier 2. Let's give me a break. But I think for the most part, I think if we had Pantheism at 3, the deck could very well be viable. Could be a decent, like, bottom tier 2 deck, and that's fine. But I mean, we're just kind of just pushing buttons here. We're just kind of, you know, just kind of just playing the sky. We're kind of just playing the Necros thing. We're playing the Blackwing game where we give pieces back one banlist at a time. It's, you know, but it is what it is. It's not Monarchs aren't going to do anything. In other words, is what I'm trying to say. Next, we have Elemental Hero Stratos 2/3. I remember a time when Stratos was first. I remember a time when Stratos first got banned on the ban list. It was actually quite a shocker. No one saw it coming. In fact, I think everyone vehemently disagreed with the decision of banning Stratos, and in fact, it's one of the main reasons why our ban lists are separate to this day. But for some reason, the TCG has really just split hairs on Stratos for the longest time. And I guess for the fact that heroes aren't doing anything in the OCG, they probably won't do anything here, which I guess is a fair assertion to make, because it really, I mean, they have a lot more broken tools to their disposal for heroes than we do, and it's not doing anything over there. So having 3 Stratos, despite, you know, a Hero Lives being at 1, and for them, and they even also have, well, I mean, they could actually see some super poly potential, but I think there's actually a deck that we're going to be discussing a little bit later that has more of a super poly abuse to it, but, you know, we're just splitting hairs here. But I think Elemental Stratos here being a 3 gives the hero deck a lot of tools, gives the hero deck a lot of versatility, and allows it to do a lot of things that it couldn't already do, and it lets it do it more often. So I'm happy that Elemental Hero Stratos is back. I wasn't really the one of those people that was screaming off the top of my lungs to bring this card back, but nonetheless, we are still here. I'm still waiting for my Tri-Infecting Virus to be back at 3. I will never not put that card on my ban list predictions. The next card that we're going to talk about is Inzektor Dragonfly. So, Inzektor Dragonfly is back at 3 in the OCG. I think Hornet is still at 1. Let me check. Oh no, Hornet is at 3. Okay, so Hornet is at 3. And Dragonfly is now currently at 3. But that doesn't really make it that much of a difference. So I don't think this is going to be that big of a deal. We'll see it, you know, you'll see it at your locals. People will play it because they like the nostalgia of Inzektors, and you might see it at the bottom end of your regional qualifiers. But for the most part, I think Inzektors might not see any play whatsoever. They are actually getting quite a bit of insect support in the future with a new Link monster, so maybe we'll see. Not gonna cross my fingers though. And the last effect monster on this list, but not the last monster here, is Chirrut. Chirrut is everyone's favorite person to want off the ban list at 3. We don't want Unicorn back to 3 because that would be probably a little bit too much. And I kind of agree. Having a Floodgate to where you're only allowed to special summon 1 extra deck monster from your deck, or from your extra deck, is a little too broken still. But Chirrut back to 3, it gives the deck a little bit more versatility. It doesn't make it necessarily broken, but we definitely will see this deck be a little bit more competitively viable. It was already somewhat of a tier 2 deck that people were playing, so I think that we could see this actually to maybe take a few more spots than it already has been. So we'll see how this plays out. And the last monster, the one that we really want to discuss here, I want to discuss here, is El Shaddoll Construct. So, I think Shaddolls, once they get their new structure deck, depending on the good support, could very well be tier 1 again. I think the deck is still viable as a tier 2 option to this day, because of the fact that they can abuse Super Poly, and the fact that Winda is still such a pretty good monster that is just crazy. Construct still does things. It's not as bad as it used to be. Sending a Shaddoll monster from your deck to the graveyard is not that good. You might draw yourself a card. You might blow up a back row. You might blow up a monster or something like that. But for the most part, Construct is not that good. And attacking into your opponent's monster and destroying it if it has higher attack, if it's a special monster, it generally isn't that particularly great. Though they do desperately need a new Link monster. That Link 2 is quite awful, but you only play it because it's a Shaddoll name, and the fact that it's a Link monster. But other than that, you play Wee-Witch. Wee-Witch is way better. So, but this is something to be looking out at. Shaddolls in the past have heavily abused Super Poly, so we could very well see that same notion replicated here. The one of 2 spells on the semi-limited list is Royal Tribute. Gravekeepers wasn't doing anything with Royal Tribute at 1 or 2, and now I think at 3, because of the new ruling where you can't verify the cards in your opponent's hand, makes the deck a little weaker, makes the deck a little bit worse. But, you know, I was playing Link Evolution, and Royal Tribute's pretty good, but the difference is that they still have hand verification in the OCG. We do not, but for the most part, I think this pushes Gravekeepers back a little bit. It does make them a little better. I'm not going to say that it doesn't, because that would be a lie. But to say that they're competitive, don't think so. Not yet. They need a little bit more support that could push them that way. I think Supernaturalist is the fusion is a pretty good card, but for the most part, it's really slow. It doesn't really do anything. So here we are. And the last card that I think is probably the most interesting hit on this ban list is Super Rejuvenation. It's not really a hit because it's coming straight off the 3. This card actually was at 0 before today. This card was at ban. You could not play this card at any point in time. And this card has been banned since 2014, actually, because of Dragon Rulers. If you've ever played a Dragon Ruler format, you'll know why this card's banned. So basically, for those of you who are uninitiated and don't know what this card did back then, generally speaking, this card would draw you about 6 or 7 cards for each, would draw you 5 or 6 cards for each discarded Dragon-type monster that you sent to the graveyard with your Dragon Rollers. It works with your tributed dragon monsters as well, so don't worry about that. But the broken thing about this card is that if you were to draw into another Super Rejuvenation during that cycle, you can activate that Super Rejuvenation and then draw more cards. It was actually quite insane. Though I'm kind of interested to see how this will actually pan out in the TCG. It's not doing anything in the OCG, so we're definitely not. I'm not saying this card is broken by any stretch of the imagination, but we actually will see it being played in Dragon Maids because they do tribute a lot of monsters. So maybe having that at their disposal will give them a bit more competitive edge over the rest of the meta. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not entirely certain about that, but it is pretty good. I think for the most part, it's relatively fair. It's fine. It's also guaranteed to be in the Lost Star promotion now because it went to 3. We're gonna get that Lost Star promotion, even though it wasn't voted for Foolish Burial, and Foolish Burial should be in that thing. But I'm rambling here. So yeah, overall, it's a very good list. It doesn't do a whole lot, but it does a whole lot, but it doesn't do a whole lot. I think this is one of the very few. I think this is one of the first minimalist ban lists in a long time that has hit so few cards and done so much for the game. Hitting Widowmaker just cripples the aggressive nature of the deck, and now you have to play other floodgates or you have to play different control cards to make the deck viable. And Orcust is not splashable in every deck, and Ogpain can just summon negates for free. So that's basically what this list is supposed to do, and it's a touch-up list. It's a touch-up list. Let's be real here. It's just to touch up some of the bad cards on the list, and it's also to take some cards off the list because they're just cluttering space at this point. So yes, next we're going to be talking about every single card, or what I think is going to be the shaping up meta. I'm not going to give them any particular rank, but I will discuss them in detail as to why I think they're going to be still viable, or why they're going to be viable. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about here is True Draco, actually. True Draco has been kind of one of these decks that has been flourishing throughout the game, in and out, all over the place, and it's quite crazy. Yeah, True Draco just has a lot of floodgate capabilities. It has a lot of draw power. It's consistent. It's pretty powerful. You can tribute on your opponent's turn. You can pop cards on your opponent's turn. You can pop your spells and to pop their spells. You can pop your traps to pop their monsters, so on and so forth. I think that's going to be one of the big contenders. The next big contender I think is going to be Sky Striker, despite Widowmaker being at 1 and Multi-World being at 1 as well. They still have access to Mystic Mine, which I think pushes the deck over to be pretty good. That by itself, and the fact that the deck consistently can make it and consistently reach it is pretty good. So that's quite interesting on that part. We will still see it. It won't be the best deck. It probably will not be the top. It probably will still be in the top 5, but it will not be the best deck. So yeah, Pure Orcust is going to be another thing here. it's going to be a competitively viable deck. On top of like Lunalight Orchestra as well as Dark Warrior Orchestra, we'll probably see some experimentations with Dark World Orchestra, Warrior Orchestra, but I think Lunalight Orchestra is probably going to be the more viable one if we're going to be seeing any variant of that. And Pure Orchestra is going to be another bigger representation, I think, than that. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how that plan pans out. The next deck is Salamangreat. Salamangreat is going to probably still be in their top 5 tier status, just barely hanging on. They still have a lot of consistency issues, but the combo deck is still pretty good. They do lose to Nibiru, they do lose to the one hand trap, but if you can play through that and you're skilled enough to do that, then the deck will carry you. It's still going to maintain its top 5 status. And the number 1 deck, I think, is going to be probably the most experimented with and then probably the most prevalent. This is going to wrap up the video, is Pure Thunder Dragon, because realistically the only thing that hit Thunder Dragon is maybe Agapane, and if that. Actually, there's one more deck I want to talk about before I end the video off here, but Pure Thunder Dragon is going to be quite a contender in the meta because of the fact that nothing really got hit. It's still just up there in competitive success. Making Colossus is still pretty good. Making Titans are still pretty good. Your monsters still do a lot of stuff, and it's just overall pretty good. And the last deck, this is actually going to be the last deck, is Pen Mages. Whether it's going to be just, you know, straight up regular Pen Mages, or if it's going to be Endymion Pen Mages. Whether you see Pen Mages or not is entirely irrelevant. We will definitely have Pen Mages in the format. Definitely going to be a tier 1 deck for sure. They only really lost Agapane, and they really didn't need Agapane. They could still make their 4 negates and still laugh at you. So I wouldn't really count this deck out. So anyway, guys, if you did enjoy this video, please leave a like on this video and tell me what you guys think about this video as well. Tell me if you want to see more stuff like this in the future. Also, do stay tuned, because I will have the rest of the deck lists from YCS Fort Worth that I've recorded up until this point up on the channel in the next coming days. And as well, I will be starting to post more feature matches on the channel as well for my locals. So if you do want to see more of that, just stay tuned, and I will see you guys in the next video. This has been All Things Entertaining, signing out.